Do you yearn for travel that involves outdoor adventure and learning? I do. I also have a passion for all things farming and agriculture. I've traveled to exotic jungles to learn about growing chocolate. I even once owned my own organic vegetable and sunflower farm. And now I'm planning my journey back to agriculture. Agritourism, defined as travel that involves some type of agricultural experience. Agritourism is all about entertaining. But the marketing strategist in me knows that at its core, agritourism is really about educating, and education affects change. My future farm needs to deliver a profound experience to all of its visitors. It needs to educate people about food, health, and climate. Join me to learn from experienced agritourism farmers and entrepreneurs and help me build my future farm strategy. And who knows, maybe one day soon you'll find yourself in a tropical jungle cutting open cacao pods with a machete, or savoring an outdoor plant-to-plate community dinner with 100 guests at a farm in Illinois. So let's tap into the agritourist in you. Welcome to the Agritourist Podcast. I am your host, Jen Ross. Today we are chatting with Donna Del Rey, owner of Relish Culinary Adventures. Relish Culinary Adventures, love the name, is a culinary program that brings together talented chefs and fabulous cuisine at a variety of captivating rural locations, including farms and orchards, to create one-of-a-kind authentic cooking classes, culinary tours and excursions, and catering services. Based in Healdsburg, California, in the heart of the Sonoma County wine country, Relish offers culinary events on a wide range of topics, from wine country cuisine to ethnic specialties, cheese making to wild mushroom foraging. The wild mushroom foraging is one of my favorites. In addition, Relish hosts activities that bring people together in the kitchen, such as private cooking parties and corporate team building events. Donna has such an authentic and transparent nature. Owning your own business is hard and requires a lot of resiliency, risk, leaps of faith, and strategic thinking and planning. But it sometimes requires you to react and do things that are not aligned with the initial vision and plan. And when you need to do this, you sometimes feel a sense of desperation, that you are doing everything to make your business survive, even if it doesn't completely align with the vision. However, I believe that pivoting and diversifying is sometimes necessary in order to survive and eventually thrive. And that is what happened to Donna. She pivoted, she diversified her income streams, she survived, and now she is thriving once again. That is the real journey of an entrepreneur. And although Relish Culinary and its mission to connect people to where their food comes from is at the forefront of our discussion, I think Donna's openness about her business challenges and ability to be flexible are truly at the heart of our discussion and is such an important story to be told. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Donna. So it's a pleasure to be speaking with you, Donna. I'm excited to hear about you and your company. I'm just very interested in this category, being in the farming world and, dabbling in some of the farm to table in my old farm. But why don't we start with you? I know you have a marketing and business development background similar to myself, so we we share some similar skills. So tell me about you and how this kind of before Relish started. Give me the backstory, and then let's lead up into what you're doing now, and then we'll explore the company.
Yeah, for sure. Well, even weirder is I have actually a degree in chemistry. And of course I do, right? That totally makes sense. And
mine was accounting, so it's a little bit in line with the
what? And but I was crazy lucky to get a job in tech with a company that wrote very industry leading software for chemical and pharmaceutical research. And so I love this story of getting a job that I didn't even know existed when I was studying. And, literally earlier in my life in high school, if you'd asked me, what do you see yourself being? It was definitely not a tech, a tech, what's that? Who knew that even existed? So I worked for that company for more than 20 years, which is also
wow
in tech. but started off in lower level positions and moved my way into marketing and then into business development and strategic partnerships and also into business or pricing and licensing models. um, I mean, I just, yeah, it was kind of an interesting little progression, but super exciting and fun and really a wonderful company and wonderful people to work with. When I started Relish, it was with a friend who she and I both love to cook. She's actually a super talented home cook. Certainly back then, way more skilled than I was. Probably now, still very way more skilled than I was. But she wasn't working at the time. She had taken time off from teaching to raise her young children, and she totally convinced me that we needed to start this business because her youngest was now going to kindergarten and she was kind of looking for something to fill her time. And we had been going to cooking classes. And in those days, the closest cooking class was an hour in any direction from Healdsburg.
Wow.
You had to go to Marin, you had to go to Sonoma or way up to Boonville. And we couldn't figure that out. Like, why is there nothing closer in this region? It's such a perfect place for all the farms and chefs and cooking and whatever. And so, after many Saturday nights of wine drinking and discussing this, finally on a Sunday sober morning, she called me and said, "We're going to do this." And I was working full time at that point. And so we just sort of dabbled and threw together some things to see what the interest would be. And about a year in, it was really busy. We were doing a lot. We had events probably every other weekend because we didn't have, a huge amount of money to invest at that point in time. It was still sort of experimental. We mainly did events at like restaurants on days they were closed and wineries. Some people invited us into their homes to do things. And we were pretty, like we didn't know what we were doing. Neither of us had any kind of professional food background. We just felt like we were our audience. We were, people who live in this region and who love all the foods and the ingredients and love to cook and be adventurous with food. And so we started creating these very experiential classes.
So what was the first one? Like, what did you do first? How did you
The
actually
first,
kick
that's so
this
fun.
off?
The first one we did, okay, first one we did was just to see if we could actually pull this off. I was then a member of this, even calling it a club makes it sound way more than it is, but it's a community just north of here in Geyserville with a lake and a clubhouse. Very, very simple, beautiful spot. But they had a beautiful outdoor kitchen and a grill, and they would host a lot of parties up there for the community members. So we invited a chef that we knew who was really interested in teaching and all of our friends. And we put together a menu, a summer grilling menu, and did this just to see if we could actually pull this off. And it was fun. And, of course, all of our friends just sat around, talked, and didn't pay attention. As friends do when you get them together, right? They really weren't there for the class. They were there to, for a fun dinner and to be together with us. But it gave us at least a little bit of confidence that we could do this. We could pull this off. We could put together a menu that makes sense and works and that
Okay.
it was always going to be hands-on. At that point, we figured it would be pretty hands-on. And so our first real classes where people paid us money were that was July. Then by October, I think it was like October 13th was our first class. And I'm trying to remember which one it was. I know we had 4 classes on our first schedule, couple in November, couple in October. And I'm trying to remember if it was I might have been a local chef. Again, these were mostly friends of ours at first. She was a pastry chef, very notable pastry chef, still is. And she did a class at our local coffee place, Flying Goat Coffee, after it closed at 6 p.m. And it was a chocolate and coffee baking class.
Nice.
And so she made It was awesome. And at that point, it was a demonstration because we were in a cafe, right? So we just set up a table. She had done some things ahead. She did some things live. We told them, oh, we won't use any of your equipment. And then we used like every plate and every fork and then stayed and did the dishes after and stuff. It was pretty funny because we were just that clueless. But it was amazing. They had brewed us up a big pot of coffee. We whipped up a whole thing of whipped cream. We had made Kahlua and well, coffee liqueur and um, something else ahead of time and then shared the recipe with people. And we put bottles out with this big bowl of whipped cream, and people were drinking coffee with booze. And then we gave them all this chocolate, cooked things. People decorated their own plates with squeeze bottles of chocolate ganache and then filled the little window panes with raspberry sauce and kiwi sauce. And so they were making like Christmas things on their little serving plate and then with the wedge of cake next to it. It was so fun. And people left very wired, drunk and wired. And so we definitely got a following very quickly with people that thought this was super fun, like a different place, a different theme every time. What are they going to do next kind of thing. And it was a really good organic way to start without a huge investment in infrastructure. We bought some equipment. Over time, we bought some tables and chairs. We were loading everything in our Volvo station wagons.
I was going to say, so you were completely mobile at that
Oh, yeah.
time, and
Yeah.
just going out to different locations. And before I forget, where did the name come from?
Mm.
I love the name.
Yeah. We sat down and talked about a name. And relish was one of the first things we came up with. And then we kept talking ourselves out of it because we kept saying, we would tell people we're thinking of calling it relish. Do you think of pickles? And we kept thinking, oh, people are just going to think of pickles, like pickle relish. Like this is not. And so then we were thinking like the Healdsburg cooking school or something more generic. We never wanted it to be about us, our names or anything, because we're just home cooks. We weren't the reason. We were never really going to be leading the classes. We always had this vision of lots of wonderful local chefs, talent that we could bring in. And so in fact, my husband's idea was 2 hot tomatoes. And
I like that
and we were laughing. We're like, no, it's not about us. But my license plate and our logo is 2 tomatoes because as a whatever of my husband's 2 hot tomatoes idea. It was pretty funny. And so when we met with the graphic designer to actually kind of make it all formal, she said, well, what names are you thinking of? And we're like, well, the Healdsburg Cooking School or Relish Culinary. She's like, oh my God, it has to be relish. It's a verb, it's a noun. And we're like, you don't think of pickles? Like we were so fixated on it was people were going to think.
But it doesn't, it like doesn't matter though. It,
Well,
it's a foodie type of,
it is. Well, and I think now too, relish means more than it did 20 years ago. It was kind of the stuff in the jar, the green stuff in the jar was relish. And I think as people's, food vocabulary and knowledge has expanded so much over the last 20 years, relish can mean so many things now, right? It doesn't have that. Anyway,
That's
but
great.
yeah. So that was easy. The graphic designer's like, yeah, there's no decision at all. And we're like, okay. And she was right. Yeah.
So how did you find it challenging to find venues and chefs, and like how did you navigate that world?
Well, again, since we were kind of doing this, well, we were definitely doing this super part-time, couple events a month. We really never had a problem finding spaces. We knew enough people, and it was such a curious thing that like really wineries loved it because we bring people in and we did classes in wine caves and yeah, I have so many fun photos from those days of just setting up in really unusual places. We did events on farms, and we were so clueless we would forget to ask things like, do you have running water? And so, or like a bathroom. And so we did one at a farm that was absolutely exquisite, but their bathroom was a single outhouse that was for the farm workers. It's like if you can hold it, you know. Um, so like and again, I think in some ways, looking back on those days, if we'd really known how hard it was going to be, we never would have done it, you know. There's something about a little bit of the ignorance that just makes you a little braver, and you just kind of figure like, well, we'll figure it out. But yeah, and then people we didn't even know would reach out to us and say, oh, come do an event at my house. And you're trying to explain to them, you're going to have 12, 15 people really making a mess in your kitchen, like really making a mess. And people were like, no, it'd be fun. And of course, we're in wine country, so these homes were spectacular, right? Like it was the very voyeuristic, like to be in these people's beautiful homes and kitchens. So yeah, and then the restaurants on days off, that was super fun because we'd get the chefs to do classes with us and in their restaurants on their days off, and that was cool. So yeah, and there's so many chefs up here. It's such a magnet for food people, just because of all the amazing ingredients and resources that are at your fingertips. Yeah, so we didn't, I mean, usually when we'd ask someone, they'd say yes, but then we learned also some people really aren't designed for teaching. And so we had a few funny situations with chefs that just really didn't talk.
Yeah, I've met a few.
Yeah, God love them. Super great chefs. But heaven forbid they actually have to say a sentence while they're cooking. And especially with a demonstration, which in the early days, actually, a lot of the classes were demonstration. It was, I learned how to be a kind of an interviewer, and to ask probing questions so they could get them started talking.
Right.
So yeah, again, the funny things we learned, right? So,
Oh yeah. So how did you transition from a part-time, this being a part-time gig
well,
to this full-time, thriving business?
right. Well, yeah. So after about a year, my business partner, in fact, there was a moment. So after a year, there was a space in town, a really, really large restaurant that had closed. And there were because it was such a big space, there were a few businesses talking about kind of taking over the space and kind of chopping it up a little bit and sharing it. And had a commercial kitchen, all this stuff. So we said, well, let's go look at it. Maybe like this could be the next step. And my partner brought her father, who was an architect. And because we thought, oh, well, he can really see things, like, maybe give us some ideas about cost. And we went into this kitchen and it was such a mess. I mean, like literally baling wire and duct tape holding the stove together, and really old equipment that all just needed to be gutted, and walls in the wrong place. It was horrendous. And so that was kind of weird to just it was my first exposure to just like what a really gross commercial kitchen is. And then so her father was standing there saying, God, it's going to cost you at least like $100,000 just to demo this place and get it all cleaned up and get everything out, and probably have to move some plumbing and update the electrical and whatever. And I looked over at my partner, and she was kind of leaning against this wall with this look on her face that was like, oh no, like no. I'm and I at the moment I'm like, what's happening right now? And I wasn't really sure. So we finished up our visit and left. And 2 days later, she called me and she goes, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be involved anymore. She's like, this is a lot of work, way more time than I expected it would be. She felt like she had like sacrificed time with her kids all summer as we did more and more and more of these events. And she's like, and she says, we're not making any money. And I'm like, yeah, because we're starting, like everything we make, we're putting back in, we're buying more equipment, we're marketing, time. Right? Like I was really surprised, because it's like, well, that's how it goes at the beginning. she basically hit that moment standing there, and she'll tell you this, in that kitchen, and just said, "Oh no, no." Like, and so yeah, so she kind of abruptly left,
And you
but
were
she was,
still working.
yeah, well, I
You
was
were
still had my
working.
full-time job,
Okay, yeah, I was gonna
and
say,
we had a
man.
schedule of events coming up, and our partnership agreement was like, oh, 3 months notice, blah, blah, blah. But mentally, she was
She
done.
was
She had
checked
made
out,
that
yeah.
decision, and I get that.
It's hard with young kids.
Yeah, right.
It's a lot of demands. Yeah,
And
it's
so I
yeah.
took it on, like full on took it on. And the way we had been doing things, I had been doing a lot of the office work, the marketing, the website, all that. And she had been doing a lot of the planning and purchasing and prep work and stuff like that. And so I started doing it all, did a couple of events sort of on my own, one of
That's
which
a lot.
went really
That is a lot.
badly with a local notable chef. Um, and I felt like I almost had a nervous breakdown that month, because like I was just so focused on how we had done things that I couldn't see beyond how to do things differently now. And finally, I don't even know what it was. And I finally said, I have to hire some people. Like, I can't, again, I like, and so I went to my job. They allowed me to go part-time, which I had been part-time when my kids were younger. So they had allowed me to go back to like 4 day a week. I hired two people, built an office in my house. So I had more of I had an office manager, and then I brought on um, just like somebody who could like help me with recipes and things like that, very, very part-time. And then I could see, oh, okay, like I could see how this was becoming a business, and that I could do this on my own, but of course I needed help. Duh. I mean, it was so obvious, and yet you get so, I don't know.
Well, yeah, understandable. Yeah.
I think is that a woman thing too? That we feel like if I just work a little harder, just
Yeah.
don't sleep a few more hours,
It probably is.
like I can do this. Like it's doable. There's nothing in here I can't do. It's just time.
And it's also hard when you start taking on people, that's a whole different level of commitment, even if it's part-time.
Mhm.
That's a big transition right
Oh,
there.
it was huge.
Um,
It was definitely a big turning point in a lot of ways in me, like emotionally, and kind of letting go of what I thought the business was going to be with my partner, who, by the way, we're still very good friends. We just got back from a trip to Italy together. Um, and I mean, I still think about how much fun she and I had, and how well we worked together, and how creative we were together. And I lost a lot of that, when she left. And yeah. So it was definitely definitely a turning point on many, many levels, around structuring it as a business, around it had originally been a partnership. I had to then turn around and sole proprietorship and change that. Delegating things, which I wasn't really good at. Um, yeah, yeah.
so
Um,
what happened with the space then? Did you ever?
Oh, so for 4 years, 4.5 years, I continued this pop-up model, doing
Okay.
events once or twice a month, expanding kind of what we did and how we did it and who we were partnering with. And one of the places we did events was here at Hotel Healdsburg, or one of our beautiful hotels downtown. They had this lovely breezeway. They had a chef back in the day who's still in the area, who would do classes there. And it got the hotel thinking, oh, this could be a really interesting business to kind of have on site. And so they ended up renting some space across the street from the hotel to expand conference space. And they invited me to rent from
Wow.
them.
Okay.
And so worked with them and the design team to design the space, did all this stuff. And then they got into some legal issues with the owner of the land that put everything back for another year and a half. So actually that probably started 2 years in, but by the time I actually signed the lease and built it out and moved in, it was 4.5 years in.
Wow.
Um,
Wow. Okay.
yeah, I was definitely the tail on the dog of that one because I had no control over anything. Um, and by that point, the hotel had pulled out. And so I was leasing directly from the landlord. The space had been built, but not finished. And then they went into mediation. It was a really weird,
Oh,
yeah. And so I'm
that's a
like,
tough one.
and then I actually came this close to signing a lease for space in Geyserville. And then that owner came back and said, no, we'll work something out. So yeah, so then opened my bricks and mortar space in March of 2008. And of course, the
Wow.
economy took had a bit of a problem later that year, which was not in my business plan. Yeah, me or anyone
Oh,
else.
yeah.
So
That's a tough one.
that was not the way I thought things would go. And had a very, very rough few years trying to figure out how much longer it would last and do I keep putting more money in? And that was not fun at all.
You were still working part-time though.
I no. Oh, so literally, I signed the lease for the space in August of 2007 and hired my contractor, did all the stuff. And I was going to give notice at my job, like right away. And my husband had just started a new job here in the area. And I thought, it's not going to be, I mean, we still have to do the build out. It's not, whatever. Let's just wait a few months, make sure you're settled in. In October, my company got bought. The company I worked for got bought, and they did a mass layoff. And I'd been there 22 years. So I got a really nice severance package and was probably the only person there that was not upset getting laid off. So the timing was weirdly great and gave me an amazing cushion. I mean, not enough with the recession, but a nice cushion to kind of get started and not feel, you know, that we were just really dependent on that immediately.
Yep.
So yeah, so I did. I quit. That was the end of that. And I was, I had been telling my manager, who I adore and still, friends with, like, if there's going to be some kind of a restructuring or layoff, then you want to pick someone who's like, okay about going. I'm the one. Not that I'm really dedicated. I'm doing the job. I'm dedicated to the job, but pick me. It was kind of our
It's
little
a long
ongoing
time.
joke. And then like 40% of the company got laid off. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we made it through, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't fun. And I mean, I look back and I don't know, maybe rationally I should have stopped. I should have just cut my losses and stopped. But in the moment, it was like, we put a lot of money into that space. It was really hard. Um, Cooking classes actually did well because people were staying at home more and cooking more, but corporate events literally dried up overnight. We called it the AIG effect. I don't know if you remember, AIG got in trouble with all those
Yep.
boondoggles, trips to
Yep.
Bermuda. And so companies were like Oracle would call and say, we want to do a corporate event. And I give them the price and they go, oh, that's out of our budget. And I'm like, yeah, I know it's not out of your budget because I used to work a lot with Oracle, but people just couldn't spend money on anything without it
Right.
feeling like it would look bad. And so that was hard. But I actually increased the number of chefs I was working with because they were also kind of hurting. And so I partnered with a lot of chefs to do more catering, which was never my intention. But whatever you need
You have
to do,
to,
you did.
yeah, you have to do it. You had the facility,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know?
Yeah. And
So
I
sometimes you
learned,
have to pivot in order to get through bad times. I think people feel, I believe me, as marketers, we know you need to stay focused, but at the same time, you also want to survive.
yes.
So,
Well, yeah. And I figured out, again, I'm a little slow on the uptake sometimes, that my business changed from like a cooking class business to how do I make money off this facility business? And so I was subleasing to small food makers who had flexible schedules and could work around my erratic class schedules. They weren't. regular. We did a lot of catering. We'd rent out the space for business meetings if, when that came up. So yeah, it was like, oh yeah, I have to figure out ways to pay this rent, you know? So, yeah, I know I hate the word pivot because it kind of is a little PTSD-ish because I had to do it so many times. And I don't know, it sounds so, like, it sounds very, like you know what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like you're doing this on purpose, but really all it is a reaction, right? And hopefully you're reacting in a way that's going to be positive for the business. It's I don't know, like pivot, like I'm choosing to pivot. Like no, no, I'm just spinning and trying to figure out like what direction to go in next. Yeah. Yeah, so probably by about 2013, 2014.
Okay.
And it's hard because I never even had a baseline, right? I started doing classes. It was a different model. I was doing way more events. So, it was harder to gauge like what my baseline even was before the bottom fell out. So it's
Yeah.
hard to know when things really came back to normal because I don't know. I never established a normal in that space. Um, but I definitely grew. I hired more people. I had a chef on staff, full-time chef on staff who ended up running most of the events, but then still bringing in a lot of outside people to do events and, change up the offerings. We started doing a lot more corporate and private events. Um, we started doing some catering, and then it shifted to like, how do I keep all my people busy? Like, how do I generate enough business to keep everyone busy and keep them employed and keep them wanting to stay here?
Right.
Um, yeah.
Was the location a retail space as well? I recently came across this, it was an Italian focused business and they had a whole retail space up front and they had the kitchen in the back.
Uh-huh.
It was in New Jersey. I just happened to be passing and I thought they they've been around for a while and it was just one location. But I loved how they had set that up, because it gave people a reason to come in. I came in for, I saw all the culinary stuff and came in and didn't even realize there was a classroom in back.
Right. Yeah, I had a little bit of retail. We called it the essential pantry because, um, I always feel like to make good food, you have to start with really good ingredients. And that's your vinegars and your oils and your salts and, maybe some condiments and things like that. So the products that we used in-house, we would sell because we believed in them and they were local and super great quality. Beyond that, I dabbled a little bit in some, tabletop ware or whatever. It was never a focus of the business ever. I probably could have given it a lot more attention, but I never did. And I have to say, I didn't, there are a lot of businesses that are retail primary with cooking classes as a way to bring people in and show them how to use equipment and sell. And I just feel like the vibe in those places is different than what I was going for. I really wanted, and I still do, the business is about cooking here, about using the ingredients and kind of, cooking in a style that represents this region. It's not about buying a pot or a pan or a knife or whatever. And yeah, it makes sense to sell those things when they are products you believe in and whatever, but I, I'm not a retail person. That was never going to be the driving force behind what we did. Uh, and so, I mean, in the same way that like we never did skills courses, we never did like a knife skills course. Not that there's anything wrong with those courses, they're really important building block courses, but it was never the experiences um, we were going to offer. We definitely wanted to uh, focus on people having an experience that was very unique to this region. Yeah.
So you no longer in that space.
Yeah. So
Okay.
15 years. I did my
Wow.
10-year lease and then extended for 5 more years. and honestly, I mean, from the business perspective, back when I did that, my expectation was that I would use those 5 years to find a way to kind of sublease or move away from the space and find, like, maybe have somebody buy me out of the lease, because it was a turnkey commercial kitchen ready to go. So much value in that, because there's so few commercial kitchens in Healdsburg, that I just thought it would be obvious that a restaurant or somebody would come in and and want to buy me out of my lease. And then so that was 2008, 2018. I added the 5 years, and then of course COVID hit. And so I had had a couple of people come in and look at the space, and then COVID, of course, changed things immensely. And I think people were kind of looking for deals, and Healdsburg doesn't have deals. And my rent was really high. I think I was charging a really fair price for the buyout, but the rent is just high. It's high in Healdsburg, and it scared a lot of people away. And I went, there were a lot of issues around parking requirements for restaurants in town that scared people away. And it just never happened. And at that point, I knew when I added the 5 years, I wasn't going to go beyond that. There was no way. I mean, and then COVID hit, things got hard again. That was definitely, I wasn't going to extend into 2023. Yeah. But once things kind of started to open up again, business came back really well. I think a lot of companies, people were still working remotely, as they still are. Here we are 4 years later. And so an opportunity to come to Healdsburg for a meeting and gathering was like a big deal. And we called it at the time community effervescence. There was this amazing, like, people were so excited to see each other, having not been together for a year,
Yep.
year and a half. And so corporate business came back huge, and really has not let up. So the irony is the business was going great, and I still closed the space just because it was time.
So you went back to the original,
yeah,
more of the original model.
Kind of,
Isn't that interesting, huh?
Right. I did another pivot or whatever. This time very intentional, right? And yeah, kind of back to the original model, but I want to do it, I would hope, 20 years smarter than I did
Absolutely.
20 years ago. I have partner locations. Anyway, it's just a lot. It's not the same model in that it's not like a different cooking class every few weeks and hope that the crystal ball shows that people will sign up and come. Like, we are doing almost entirely corporate and private events, much more dependable business, and then interspersed with classes that are open to the public. That are often kind of repeatable, and so there's an economies of scale.
Right.
Absolutely. I'm not, because I have to say, every one of those original cooking classes took a long time to plan. You're agreeing on the menu, you're talking about the flow, and how are we going to do this, and who's going to do what, and how many groups, and how long will that take, and literally hours of time in the planning, and then you never do it again. And so this way we have a repeatable model. In fact, we're going to start in December. We'll bring back our wild mushroom foraging, which we started 20 years ago.
Tell me about that.
Oh my God, it's one of the most popular things we've done, and we continue to do. We have local private property of people that allow us to hike on the property with a group, usually about no more than 24 people or so. I have two foragers that between the two of them have been foraging for more than 80 years.
That's impressive. You need that, though, when you're doing this.
Yes. I always joke, there's a handful of classes that you want to be led by people who do this and are still here, like survived. And so mushroom foraging is one. I think even canning is another one. Like, there's risk associated with this. If you just are following some random thing off YouTube, like, it's a little scary. And cheese making is another one that you can watch all the videos in the world, but there's something to standing there with someone who's really talking you through this, and you see the magical transformation of cream or milk to cheese. that gives you the confidence to really do this yourself at home. So, yeah, so I have these two people that are super great, really good teachers. One is also a trained chef and a local winemaker. So she puts together our menus. So as the group is out hiking, we have done all the prep work for our wild mushroom meal. And while we're out hiking, we're reheating and kind of getting the final food prep together. And then after the hike for a couple hours, we all gather and have this amazing wild mushroom meal, learning about all the
Wow.
different kinds of edible mushrooms, doing side by side tastes of different really choice edible mushrooms. And just, it's like the coolest day ever. You're hiking through the beautiful forest. We talk about putting your mushroom eyes on, and the whole forest bathing sort of release of oxytocin that happens. It's fantastic. So those are, again, continue to be some of the most popular things we do.
Yeah, I
Um,
want to do that one. What do you think is who do you do that one as a private event and or a public event or
Mostly
both?
public, actually.
Okay. And who like what do you think is so appealing about that one in
I, I,
particularly?
I again, I've been doing these wild mushroom experiences for 20 years, and they've only grown in popularity, right? Foraging and wild foods, people are like, early on when we'd say we're going mushroom foraging, people would literally gasp and like, like how, like, what if you eat a poisonous mushroom? And I always laugh, and every once in a while I'll get that now, but it was way more. I get that all the time back, 20 years ago. And I laugh because I'm thinking, what do you think we do? We walk through the forest and we just pick things and shove them in our mouth and wait and see what happens. Like, right? Like I don't think anyone's thought through when they say that what that really means, because
Right.
that's like not what we do, right? You spend all this time talking about how mushrooms grow and their seasonality and their what they grow with and under and what to look for. And then, if you find something edible, it's a gift, but you're looking at the forest in a way, it'll change completely the way you take a hike, because you
Right.
start to see things. Again, get your mushroom eyes on. You start to see things that you've just walked by forever, and you just don't take the time and the attention to see. And so we're finding all kinds of weird fungus and witch's butter and all kinds of things, and you're learning about the impacts it has on the forest and all these things. And then if you're lucky, you find a chanterelle, or you find something that's edible, or a bunch of something that's edible, and it's a gift. But it's so funny when people literally, oh my gosh, that's so scary. And you're like, actually, it's really not. Especially when you hike with my leaders, Julie and David, they are super conservative. If there's anything that's maybe not quite what you think it is, we're not going to eat that. Like it's so easy to avoid a problem, right?
No, I love what you said though about what people are really taking from this though, because you're really connecting them. You're connecting them to many different, to nature, to what we're eating, what we can and cannot eat, really giving the recognition that hike becomes way more than just hiking through the woods.
Yes.
And I I absolutely love that. I think that is the essence of what you've created in these culinary adventures right
Yeah.
there,
I would
you know.
agree. And the same applies when we're, with Gail Sullivan, who you've talked to out at the peach orchard.
Yes, tell me about what you've done with her.
Yeah.
I
So
love Gail.
again,
She was great.
probably going back to the beginning, almost 20 years ago, I had reached out to her about doing classes on farms because, again, I considering kind of myself like one of my audience. I wanted to learn more about these farms. I wanted to understand what they were doing and how they were farming. And of course, the product, her peaches, are sublime and like nothing you've ever had. And so she was one of the first farms that said, "Oh yeah, yeah, let's totally do this." And so we book a couple events in the summer, peak peach season, and create a 4-course menu that had peaches in every every course, sweet and savory courses. But we'd always start with the tour of the farm, meeting Gail and often her husband, Brian, also understanding their commitment to this farm,
Yep.
that they could have easily pulled it all out and planted grapes, like so many farms in the area have done, because that's where the money is, way more lucrative to plant grapes than peaches or olives or anything else. And to then to understand their, not just their commitment to the farm itself, but to how they're farming and the hand picking and the tree ripening and how labor intensive that is, and why they do that. And so we actually started a series called On the Farm, and then followed by like Dry Creek Peach or Soda Rock Farms, or fill in the farm name, where we were doing events every summer at different farms and learning about their processes. And we'd have a lot of people come back to these classes and talk about this connection to the earth and this clearer understanding of the dedication it takes to farm, the challenges, you're at the mercy of the weather and the water and all the things.
Yep.
And it was so evident from these farmers and owners how dedicated they were and how important this was to them. So we've continued to do this with Gail. We also do some classes at some other farms around the area. And again, with the same message every time, and really trying to get, again, it's never about me. It's about the chef, the food, the location, the farmer. It's all the other things that make the event unique. And it's
But
magical.
it does take someone to be the quarterback.
Yeah,
So,
totally. The choreographer, but
yep.
it's like never. I mean, other than doing an introduction and a thank you, I'm behind the scenes. But there's something so magical about sitting. Well, we have the long table down the row of the peach orchard, where you can literally just reach around and touch the peaches right over your shoulder, and you're hearing the stories and you're tasting this food, and the sun and the moon starts to come up, and like it really is so memorable, so
Right.
beautiful. I think it touches people in ways they don't expect.
Right. Did Outstanding in the Field contact you, the company Outstanding in the Field?
No,
Oh,
it's
okay.
funny.
I
We
thought she
started
had
the same
said that.
year. We
Oh,
both
you
started in
did.
2003, and it's been fun to see them grow. I mean, one of the reasons I opened the bricks and mortar spaces, because I felt like their business wasn't scalable in its pop-up kind of form. But Outstanding in the Field figured out a way to do that, and to kind of figure out how to scale and sort of pop up, how to outsource certain components so that it was doable all around the world. It's pretty
Yeah,
interesting.
literally.
Yeah.
Yes, I've been watching them evolve. Um, Obviously, I mean, I don't know how large are your, like, how big do
Small.
you go? Yeah,
It's
which theirs are huge,
huge.
and they have like an army of people come in, and they have it down. Gail was saying they measure everything out, like every seat is measured, and it's also there's a whole art piece
Yes.
component to it. When you see their table is in a swirl, and like
Yes.
it just
With
it's
Jim Denovan, with their founder, who's
yes.
the visual artist. Yes.
Yeah, so there's that component that they've added to it that's unique to them.
Yes.
So yeah, but I'm sure it's interesting to follow them and how they've evolved over time.
Yeah. And I mean, I give them a lot of credit, because they really have been able to expand that experience all around the world, to find like-minded farms to host.
Yep.
And then, they can do this because they outsource everything, right? They outsource like they find somebody local who then really runs the event, but it's their umbrella. And I mean, again, I think the biggest we've ever done, it's funny with Gail, she's always like, we can have more, we can have more. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to have more. Like, I feel like when you get too much over 25, you lose that high touch. And I have not been to an Outstanding in the Field, I must admit. been tempted many times, but I have not been. I know many people who have gone and who've had amazing experiences, but I feel like you've got 200 people, you're not meeting the farmer. Like, how are you meeting the farmer or the winemaker? And when you have 25 people, oh yeah, you're meeting the farmer. Like, you're sitting with the farmer at dinner and the
It's a
winemaker.
more, yeah, you're delivering a more intimate
It is.
experience. Not that that's not an
It's not
amazing
a better or
experience.
worse. It's just different.
Yes, and I think there's something to be said for both. I interviewed early on a woman who owns a farm in Illinois, south of Chicago, and she does. She did not. She didn't want to do the traditional farmers markets and all that, and she's like, she came up with this 100 person. She has this 100 person dinner table,
Ah,
and they do 100 person dinners. And she had the same thing at the very beginning. It was like she said it was like crazy,
yeah,
but they literally, they harvest a lot from their farm and then locally, and her husband's the bartender, and they have the whole family involved. And obviously now they have a staff or whatever, but now she has it down, but it took a while.
yeah.
But I'm like 100 people. Wow.
That is a
That's a
lot.
lot.
I mean, I've catered back in the day. I catered weddings of 120, 150. Yeah, it's a lot.
At least it's at her farm though all the time. So you're not,
Yes,
he moves around all over, like you said, to in the US and then now the world.
right,
So that's a whole different level of stuff to think about. I
right.
can't even,
For sure. No, it's for
just
sure.
even the food piece of it
Right.
and what you need to actually execute that in a location. Because we know, there's always licenses or things you have to consider depending on where you are. And I'm just like, the thought of what he does is intense.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, I couldn't imagine scaling that large. I like, and even like the mushroom classes, we could sell a lot more seats, but and we have two foragers, which is great because even if we have 25, you know, no matter kind of how spread out we are, you can generally keep an eye on one or the other forager. There's somebody close by who can answer questions. It really helps to have two
yes.
foragers. And then I'm bringing up the rear and I know this much compared to how much they know, but at least
Yeah.
like I can steer and whatever.
And everyone, yeah, the attention, everyone's questions are answered and addressed.
Yes.
So, right now, what are you like? So, I guess, how many classes are you offering? How often? Like, what does the
Yeah.
model look like today?
So today, again, primarily the business is driven by the corporate and private events. We just finished just, our kind of our peak season, August, September. We were doing probably a couple of events a week.
Wow,
And then
that's a lot.
yeah, for me, it's a lot. And in fact, with this model of the schlepping model, I call it the pop-up model, I really needed at least a day transition time in between because it's you're basically taking all your dirty stuff away and washing it in a commissary kitchen and blah blah blah. Um so it's a lot to be doing a couple things a week. And then over the summer, the repeatable public class we do is a farmers market class. My location was across the street from our weekly farmers market in Healdsburg, which is one of the reasons I loved the location. And I buy most of my produce from those vendors. Even
Terrific.
even now, I go out to the farm, or they actually deliver to me sometimes. So I have 20-year relationships with these folks. We do it's kind of like when you're in Italy or France and you go to the market and you get ingredients and you come back and cook. We would do that at Relish every month for the season, May through November. Uh, in 2023, last year, when I closed the space, I took the summer off because I was just trying to figure out the transition and where to put all my stuff and how to set up a home office, all that stuff. But this year we came back and we decided to do them every other month. And instead of lunch, because we can't just walk across the street and make lunch, I partnered with Dragonfly Floral Farm, which is a wonderful organic farm, 6-acre farm just outside of Healdsburg. And we've done events there for 20 years. Also, it's absolutely, it's one of my favorite places. I feel like my blood pressure drops like 10 points when I walk in. It's absolutely gorgeous. And so we would do dinner there. We'd get all the ingredients in the morning, meet with our group for an hour and a half, buy everything, and then it would give me time to kind of clean up, wash things, get things set up. I meet my staff back at the farm a couple hours before dinner, and then we cook dinner. And we'll probably continue with that model next summer. So we did our last one October 12th.
Great.
I have a wreath making class with Gail. So it's not food, but it gets us onto the farm in the off season, which I love. And it is gorgeous. The photos, the fall colors, the sun. Oh my God, at like 4 o'clock when we finish, and the hills are lit up like orange. And oh my God, it's gorgeous. And people all make a wreath with the peach wood cuttings from the orchard.
Oh, that's terrific. I think she mentioned that. That sounded
Really
terrific.
cool. And then we have like a little bite of like peach jam and bread and, cheese and whatever. And we drink Bellinis because we have the white peach Bellini mix from Gail's Orchard. So we get our little peach fix and then we do wreaths. So that's a fun thing in November. And then we'll start up with the wild mushroom foraging in December, and we do 2 to 3 dates a month through February.
Wow.
And those sell out. One of those will be a private event with a local winery. So they invite their wine club and we do it just for them, with all 4 courses paired with really good Pinot Noir. So good. But the other ones are all open to the public and are already selling now.
Excellent.
And then we kind of take a little break in the spring, probably, and then we'll start up our farmers markets again, and probably in May. And then as things inspire me, I'll do more. I don't know what yet. It depends a lot on locations and chefs and what's happening.
Right.
But I'm always open to doing more. It just needs to make sense. I'm not going to do it just to do it anymore.
Absolutely.
But if it's something really fun and cool and I think it would sell, we do it. So
if someone was to come to you now and say they wanted to create something similar in another part of the country,
yeah.
what advice would you give them? Like, what would you, especially it's a different world, obviously you've been through a lot.
Well, yeah.
But what would you say? What advice would you give them?
I think the hardest thing over 20 years, especially if the model is going to be like public classes, is just making sure you have the demographics to fill those classes. 20 years in, and I still joke about the crystal ball because, there were so many events that I thought for sure would sell, like would just be so popular. And then nobody signs up, or hardly anyone signs up. And then the vice versa of things that's like, well, we'll give it a try. And they're wildly popular. It's, and you kind of live and die by how well people are, if people sign up and if they, are going to commit to paying you money to do this class. And it's, when you love to cook and you love food, that's not the part of the business you want to that you get excited about, right? You want to do cool food things and make cheese and forage for mushrooms. You don't want to worry about how do I fill this class and actually make money and, that my time is worthwhile. But I think it's backwards. I think that's almost where you need to start. If you want to survive, right? You need to make sure you have an audience and that you're cultivating that audience, because you will burn all your cycles for nothing if you can't fill those classes. That's the hardest part, and even like I've been doing this 20 years, I have a mailing list with 8,000 names, and I still don't know if classes are going to sell. It's still a crapshoot every time I do a public class. So you have to be comfortable with that. And again, I think that's part of why I shifted so much to the corporate events and the private events, because they call, they book, there's a contract, they're showing up, you know how many people, you can staff it, you know how much money you're going to make. You can have menus that are seasonal and repeatable. it's you can run your business effectively and efficiently with that model. It's much harder to do that when it's a calendar of classes that vary.
Right. Well, you have a good balance now. And you said
Yeah.
the corporations, the demand seems to be
Yeah, it's
very good
strong.
right now. Yes.
Yeah. It's weird because business is generally down in the area. Hotels are down about 20-25%. They have been this summer. It's been a bit of a crisis happening in the wine country around a decrease in visitors, a decrease in sales, decrease in wine sales, lodging, etc. Restaurants are down. And so it's like, well, companies are still coming because but again, I'm not trying to book something every day, right?
Right.
I'm great with one or two a week. That's a super comfortable place for me to be without the overhead I used to have. I want to add too that as I get a little older, I'm trying to figure out ways to be more efficient and minimize the schlepping part of the business. And so I'm working right now very, very putting a lot of time into adding culinary excursions to our model. So building on these relationships with these farmers and producers and makers, getting people out to their locations, again, kind of like
Okay.
the cooking classes, hopefully doing some interactive things with them. Once we're there, it's not just a stand and watch or stand and talk, but getting people hands-on with some experiences and continuing to try to make those connections between people and where their food comes from and the challenges associated with that and the economics and the wonder and the flavors and all the things. So that I'm very much working on. And in fact, after I get off the phone here, I'm going to be working on scripts and doing a bunch of things related to that because that's what this region's about is we have like thousands of small farms in Sonoma County, thousands. Um, most of whom you'll never hear of. And so many people doing amazing things around regenerative agriculture, around farms that are literally growing food to donate to the underserved communities here. Farms doing amazing cheese making and olive oil production. And I visited a truffle farm last week that we're going to work into the tour that planted, 6 acres of hazelnuts a decade ago and are
Wow.
just beginning to harvest truffles. So all of these people that are doing things that are so important to this region and keeping agriculture alive and expanding it and in a in a in an in an era where that is so hard to do. There's not a lot of supports for small farms. There's so many regulatory pressures and other things. The land is crazy expensive. And so if we want to keep that alive here in Sonoma County, we have to talk about it more and we have to show people what it is.
Right.
So that's hopefully going to be I mean, it's related and I've done tours in the past, because we do have all these relationships, but this is really going to formalize that and it'll be public things that'll be on a calendar that people can sign up for
Absolutely.
and attend.
I think it's so needed. And, there are people obviously doing this, but it's more needed.
And there's very few people doing it here, which is astounding to me. All the wine tours, every imaginable wine tour, but food and farm. There's a really great company out in the West County that really focuses on the cheeses and oysters and all the stuff out sort of Marin and western part of Sonoma, but nothing really happening in the rest of the county. So I'm hoping that the demand is out there and that it's an attractive option for visitors and locals.
You should also connect with, I don't know if you know Rebecca Callahan. She's in agritourism. She works for UC Davis Extension. Her focus is on agritourism in California.
Ah,
I interviewed her and she's great. She's well traveled, has done a lot of things all over the world, and has really embraced this role. So she might have good connections and just some good ability, to help you in some ways. So
yeah, I'd
you
love
might
that.
just want to reach out as a good network. I had told her about Gail. She had never heard of her farm, so she was like excited to reach out. But just a resource for you possibly,
Yeah, for sure.
because
I'd
I
love
love
that.
what you're doing. So Thank you. This has been, I love what you've done. I loved how you've, diversified.
Yeah, you
No,
don't have a lot of
but
choice, right?
that's business though.
It
It's,
is. It is.
it's what we do. It's, and people don't always see all that, and when we see bigger businesses, we don't see that, but it's happening all over.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Well, and
you
I
know,
think I'm sure you realize too in your transition, like those hard skills and soft skills from tech and from business development and strategic planning. And even like I remember 20 years ago, we even had to do a little bit of our own website development in my company. Websites were kind of new. And so we had to kind of do our own pages for our the
yep,
internal division. And boy, that's how, like these things that people tell you are applicable, to other businesses and other industries, but you don't really know until you do it. And oh yeah, partnership arrangements, contract negotiations, pricing. Yeah,
yep.
super
I was
helpful.
gonna say, yes, a lot of your skills totally
Yes.
aligned with this and came in real handy
Yeah. And
along
even
the way.
honestly, having that 20-year, business career, I feel like I'm super comfortable talking to tech companies about team building, right?
Right.
And the
So,
value
yeah,
that it has for your team and why a cooking experience is a good option, you
it's
know,
a great option.
right? Anyway, so yeah,
Really is.
I don't know. I don't know if everyone should quit their day job and do something crazy like this, but the skills do
Well, you
apply.
you didn't you didn't at first.
No, I eased
You
in.
went part-time and
It's
oh,
true.
you went full-time and then you went part-time.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so it happened, you know, it gradually happened,
Yeah.
but it worked well. So you went to Italy with your friend your
Yeah.
old partner?
Well, and again, echoing a lot of what we've been talking about around food and sustainability and food access, I am an active member of our local slow food chapter. I'm actually on the board. And I went back to Italy, to Torino, to the Slow Food Terra Madre conference, which
Nice.
is an amazing, amazing experience with like-minded people from all around the world who are really dedicated to, good, clean, and fair food for all. And so, yeah, got to go back to Terra Madre in September. Brought my original business partner, who has just been threatening to go on a food trip with me, and it was great. It was super fun,
Excellent.
learning and eating and just sharing with amazing people. It was fantastic.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm sure you brought back some ideas too.
Yeah, and some food, a little bit of food, but the first time I went to this conference, I brought back a lot of food, like, jars of things and whatever, and it was really not a great idea, hard to carry, hard to schlep, whatever. So I just go for the experience and a lot of learning. There's a lot of seminars, a lot of sharing of uh like artisan makers from different regions and what they do and why and the historic significance, and it's pretty cool.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, when I get out to Sonoma County,
Yeah,
I know I want to go to the peach farm and I wanted to go on your mushroom
there you go.
hike.
Where
That
are you,
sounds,
Jen? Where are you at?
I'm Long Island,
Oh
New
yeah.
York,
Yeah,
right
you gotta
now.
come out.
But we'll see where I end up. Because I am looking for property. I just don't know. My daughter's graduating actually my youngest is graduating this May. So I kind of feel, or
College,
June.
high school?
High
High
school.
school.
So then she'll be in college, probably in Boston.
Ah,
Um, but once that happens, I have more freedom.
yeah.
I raised three, so I'm on my
Yeah,
third,
no, I feel you.
and I feel like I've been wanting to get back into something agricultural again. I have some ideas, but where and what is what I'm formulating right now. And I've been doing my due diligence and research and meeting amazing people like yourself who are doing different things, trying to just pull all the pieces together
Yeah.
and see where I end up. But I have some trips in the future, so
Yeah. It's interesting. I heard an amazing speaker yesterday. You may be familiar with her, Farmer Mai. She is a grain farmer here
okay.
outside of Sebastopol. She's also a noted consultant and environmental activist. She just won a James Beard Award
Oh, nice.
for her like food activism. And she came and spoke about grains and whole grains and growing local grains because California grows very little grain, and it's almost a crisis here
Right.
because, like during COVID, there were issues with getting grain into the state for humans and for animals and blah blah blah. And she is trying to convince people to grow grain.
Really?
Huge
Okay.
in
Yeah, see, that's what
California.
I've been looking at, like, where are the gaps,
Yeah,
depending on where, the region I'm looking in, where are the gaps? And that's what Gail and I spoke a lot about is, you know, yeah, she could have done wine, but she was looking for what's something else? Where are the gaps? Where are the opportunities? I don't need to duplicate efforts, and I'm not looking to do that either. I'm looking to say, these are my skills.
right,
I have farming, I have marketing and business development. How can I use them to create something that's needed?
right.
So we'll see. We'll
Yeah.
see where the
So
journey
look
takes
her
me.
Google Farmer Mai, MAI. Her
Okay, definitely
website's
will.
really good, but she spoke about her history and how she ended up doing what she's doing and this need, desperate need for local grain. Like when you look at how many types of wheat there are, varieties of wheat, it's like 30,000. How many seeds you can buy in the US? 10. And how many of those are designed to grow in California? Zero.
Wow.
So they've had to create
Wow.
their own sources for seed. And there's a
Huh.
cooperative in California that's growing local, like grains that were grown here 100, 200 years ago, but stopped because all-purpose flour, whatever. And so
Yep.
Sonora wheat and the Rouge de Bordeaux and all these things that are designed to grow here. And she dry farms wheat in Sebastopol and was one of the
Wow.
few over the last few years during the drought actually had a harvest. People who were growing wheat and were irrigation dependent didn't have a harvest. And this was really fascinating. I'll tell you, I think this is a thing. And of course, whole grain, because we need the fiber and blah, 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 and 14,000
Yep.
years of people eating whole grain. And then in the last 200,
Yep.
processed, ultra processed and
Yeah.
illness and blah, blah, blah. So I'm telling you,
But
looking at
no,
grain,
we'll definitely look her up, and yeah,
yeah.
but you know what? You're contributing to that education, so keep it going, you know.
Yeah, this was actually a slow food event, but I learned a ton and really like, wow, like I learned a ton about this and about grain and about this need. And I am like, after listening to this, it's like I've already been trying to shift over more to locally milled grain and wheat. And I'm gonna, now I want all my classes to shift to this because I think this is really important.
Yep.
Anyway, so
Awesome.
always
Thank
something.
you so much.
Yeah. Jen, yeah,
Thank you
keep
for
in
the
touch. If you come
time.
out this way,
Yeah,
please reach out. It'd be fun to
absolutely.
show
I
you
would
around a
love
little bit.
to. I hope our AgriTourist podcast prompts you to think more about where your food comes from, whether it be your vegetables, fruits, meats, and even those sweet treats. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with someone you think may truly benefit from or be inspired by it. Visit us at agra-tourist.com. Until next time. As we are learning from many of our farmers and entrepreneurs, strong connections help propel our visions. Through my interview with Lisa Chase from the University of Vermont Extension and Vermont Tourism Research Center, I was connected to an exciting and new organization called the Global Agritourism Network, or GAN for short. The global network is made up of agritourism stakeholders from around the world. They include farmers and ranchers, researchers, educators, community planners, policymakers, agricultural service providers, and tour operators, among others. It is currently free to join, so if you have any interest in agritourism, check them out at agritourism.eurac.edu/GAN, or just Google Global Agritourism Network. The link will be in our show notes as well. You never know, this global network may help you take your agritourism vision to the next level.